next will be George Zoto, one of his colleagues from Rice and a chairman of the department, which will be followed by Peter Hartley and Robin Sickles so that they can know that they're up next in the queue. But George, if you could unmute and give a few words, we would appreciate that.
Okay, can you hear me okay?
Yes, we can.
Very, very good. So I am George Zodro. I am chair of the department now. John came to Rice as a Henry Fox Associate Professor of Economics and Professor of Management in 1981. He's promoted to full professor in 1984. In fact, he arrived when I was just a second year assistant professor. And I still remember how excited I was to have a scholar of his stature join our department. And that was a sentiment, believe me, that was shared by all of my colleagues, but especially the outgoing and incoming chairs, Gaston Rimlinger and Gordon Smith, who had devoted just so much time and effort to recruiting him. And no wonder, John is the author of several truly seminal articles in game theory and macroeconomics, including papers on what is called the Bryant stag hunt coordination game, as well as famous papers on bank runs and financial fragility, and on various aspects of monetary policy. He has published in the most prestigious journals in our profession, including, this is an amazing feat, every single one of the top 5 journals, as well as many other top journals. I'll leave it to Peter to discuss his contributions in a little more detail, but it's obvious, even to a tax economist like myself, that John's work has had a profound impact on the profession. Indeed, when John retired, I collected some tributes from his many colleagues, co-authors, and friends, including 2 Nobel Prize winners. And among the many fond remembrances were statements like, John's work changed the way I thought about whole classes of problems in macroeconomics and monetary economics. John's theoretical work on bank panics, rate of return dominance, and the effects of open market operations was true creative destruction. And John's most influential work reflected an incredible combination of originality and imagination. He was a true scholar in every sense of the word. John was also active in a lot of other aspects of life at Rice. He was department chair for a year and served as director of graduate studies for several years. And interestingly enough, I think that experience gave him a great deal of organizational skills. And you could check that out anytime by looking out at his office door, which was just covered with articles and pictures, which looked like the hard copy version of Wikipedia, and lots of tributes to his beloved Pittsburgh Steelers. John has been an advisor and mentor to many Rice students over the years. He and Sandi were associates at Weiss College. John was named Outstanding Faculty Associate of the Year one year, Outstanding Weiss Associate, too many times to count, and was also named Favorite Rice Professor by the students at Will Rice College. He also did a lot of other stuff. He served on the Rice Admissions Committee. That was back when the faculty actually had some say in who got admitted. And he was there when his daughter Aryn was admitted. Interesting thing. And also when my daughter Catherine was admitted. So that was a really good thing. But he also especially enjoyed his service, if one can use that word, in conjunction with serving on committees, on the Rice Parking Committee. But he was a little upset that that was not enough to get him out of a particularly irritating parking ticket. John's also perhaps the only faculty member to ever be kicked out of the Rice Faculty Club, thus obtaining compelling evidence that the club does not take kindly to a member bringing a brown bag lunch to their establishment. John was a devoted and loving family man. Sandi and John met at Carnegie Mellon and just built a wonderful life together. He always spoke so fondly of her. The walls of his office were just adorned with pictures of them together, especially on their many travels. Sandi is, of course, a well-known artist whose abstract pieces, according to one review, as well as to my own personal observation, are just incredibly engaging, alluring, and visually striking. And also subject to a few arguably questionable interpretations from John's colleagues, to which he would just smile and shake his head ever so slightly. Sandi also had the distinction of having thrown what may have been the very best economics department party ever. It was a wild elephant, excuse me, a white elephant party, maybe wild elephants too, that she and John hosted in their home many years ago. And I have to say, it was quite a treat watching all of our friendly game theorists just strategizing, attempting to position themselves to be sure to go home with the white elephant of their choice. And John always lit up when talking about his daughter, Aryn, especially when discussing her marketing positions in which she promoted some of our most high-profile entertainers. Aryn's a 2001 Rice graduate and had the not always delightful experience of being a student whose parent was on the faculty, one that was shared by my wife, by my daughter as well. Indeed, on told her occasions when she even denied that her dad was that Bryant guy in the economics department, even though there was a family picture hanging on the wall in Rice College. But speaking from personal experience, the father-daughter bond is truly something special. And I know that bond was one of the most important things in John's life. I hope it's clear that I've always thought that John was the whole package. Loving husband and father, brilliant scholar, exceptional teacher and mentor, and wonderful colleague and friend. I miss him a lot, and I think of him often. Thanks very much.
Thank you very much, George, for that moving tribute. And now the next speaker would be Mr. Peter Hartley. If you could unmute yourself and say a few words.
Okay, well, a lot of things that I'd like to say have already been said, of course, and I'd sort of second what everyone's had to say about the absolute foundational character of John's research and his papers on the foundations of monetary economics and monetary policy are on all the main reading lists, even to this day, even though they were written many, many decades ago, some of them. And even a lot of his working papers from the Minneapolis Fed are still available and downloaded and referenced. And of course, his papers on bank runs were absolutely foundational. It was a little bit of an irritant, I think, to John that some other people wrote after him on this issue, but and he didn't get perhaps as much credit as he ought to have gotten, I think, for actually starting a lot of doing a lot of the foundational research on that topic. He's, as George mentioned, major papers have been published in all the major journals. And one thing that's really incredible about him is, as everyone has sort of pointed out, he really focused on the foundations of economics and thought very, very deeply, for a long time about these issues. And his work on game theory, coordination failures, the stag hunt, as George mentioned, is truly foundational as well. I think when he first worked on that subject, a lot of people were a little bit dismissive of it, but as time has gone by, it's become more and more important. I mean, some empirical work that's been done afterwards showed that he was really onto an important issue. And one thing I always remember about John that was kind of a little bit, in a way, amusing, but also illuminating, was that a lot of our seminars, we'd have speakers who would be talking about game theory concepts, and a lot of times they would start off by saying, let's assume we have a Nash equilibrium, which, those of you who've seen The Beautiful Mind would know that, the basic idea is that if you're in a Nash equilibrium, that no one would want to behave any different. But John would always ask a question to the speaker as soon as he mentioned, let's assume a Nash equilibrium. John would say, well, how do you get there? How do you know you're going to get there? It might all be very well that if you get there, you will not move away from that equilibrium, but how do you know you're going to get there? And so we could always rely on John to ask that question. But I think it really illustrates how he thought very, very deeply. And he was not trying to be a smart aleck or anything. I think he was trying to encourage the speaker to think much more carefully about how they were thinking about the problem and to think about some of these foundational questions. If you look at his papers, they're all very clever, original, and above all, I would say very succinct and very simple in structure. And it's very interesting when they sort of distill down to the essence of the question that he was interested in. And it was interesting in this regard. I was having a conversation with him one time, and he made the point that actually he thought there was a lot of commonality between his approach to economics and Sandi's approach to art. And he felt that being very abstract and succinct, and someone was in the way he did economics, he felt was very similar to the way she did art. So I don't know whether she would agree with his characterization of her art, but I thought it was very interesting. And in fact, he really loved her artwork dearly. He had pictures of her work around the office. And as George already mentioned, of course, he had pictures. Well, he had a whole gallery of things on his door to his office. And very often there would be a picture of some of Sandi's art from one of her exhibits, usually. Other things he'd have on there, of course, would be newspaper articles, often ones that were related to the sort of research he'd done in economics. If that was the case, he'd put up next to a copy of the front page of the article of his that was relevant to the newspaper article. And of course, the other thing he loved, I think, were the trips that they all took together. He had pictures of the trips up on his door. And it was fascinating to see many times the students who would just spend time standing in front of John's door reading his gallery of items. A very, very unusual professor in that regard. And I don't know of anyone else who had such a display to entertain the students. And the other final thing I think I would like to say about John is that also consistent with his research, his approach to research, his approach to economics, was quite interesting in our departmental meetings. John was a man of very few words, I would say, in our meetings and discussions, but all the words that he did speak were always very much worth listening to.
Thank you very much for those moving words, Peter. We appreciate it. The next person who's asked to say a few words about John is Robin Sickles. So, Robin, if you could unmute yourself and go ahead and.
Thank you, Sean. Peter started off by saying that a lot of what he was going to talk about had already been discussed, and since, of course, he's gone before me, even more that I was going to talk about has been discussed. But I'll still discuss it. I think we all know John was remarkably talented. My time with him was about 34 years before he passed. I came in '85. And there are, of course, characteristics of academics that I think we all sort of know and not necessarily love, that are what allows us to sort of stay in the game because of the peer reviews, the criticism of our work that's a part of what we do. And so egos and such are important to keep you going. I don't recall in the course of the back and forths that we all had, and of course we're, as academics, always we're the smartest guys in the room. I don't ever recall John ever getting upset. I don't ever recall John ever saying a cruel or a demeaning thing about anyone, which over a course of almost four different decades is a remarkable characteristic. He's a man of obvious integrity. He loved his family. I think we all recognize that, and took great pride in Aryn and, of course, Sandi's professional achievements. He, of course, complemented that love of his family with travel, and he was so excited about the travel. I mean, he's an understated man, but whenever you got him talking about places he had been or the places they were going, you could see this glint in his eye, and it was very refreshing, very refreshing. He was, of course, a committed educator, not only in college, but in secondary education. He had a life that, interestingly enough, overlapped a bit with cities that I'm somewhat familiar with, as is my wife, Janet, Cleveland being one, where she got her degrees, or several of her degrees, or a degree, I should say, and Pittsburgh, where I was born. So we had a lot of love for the Pittsburgh Steelers, and we spoke about a lot of issues that broached both of those cities over the years. You know, we're lucky to have him in our lives. I'm lucky to have had him as a colleague. It was, you know, John could have his moments, but it was impossible to stay upset at him for anything because he just cracked that smile and put you at ease, and then you'd sort of wonder, well, how could I have gotten so frustrated at whatever he said or whatever he had done or whatever the point was that he continued to make, which was probably accurate. And and I guess that sort of ends a bit, or leads me to the last thing I was going to say, which sort of, in a sense, is what I had said earlier. You know, we all think that we're the smartest guys in the room, and we all think that you know, we got the ideas that other people should listen to. Most of us would probably modify that perspective, and I certainly did. Anytime John walked in the room, he was the smartest guy in the room, and he was also a dear friend. So that's what I had to say.
Thank you very much. That was very moving and heartfelt.